What a treat to be here for this introduction to the interface control documents.
Absolutely.
Oof. Okay, should have probably looked into that before we started the webinar on the Digital Traffic Orders D-TRO to You and Me project. I'm your host for this, Paul Chandler. And as we go through, you're going to hear from a coterie of people that know a lot more about this stuff than me, including, they all definitely know what ICD stands for as well. Have no fear about that. So let's have a quick look at our agenda. We're going to hear from John Harrod Booth with an overview of the data specification. Our star developer, Gabriel, is going to talk to us about those ICDs. I am going to run a little, question and answer type session based on your feedback in the chat. And then we're going to hear from Dr. Gareth Tilley as well around, where we're going on the project over the next few weeks and indeed months. Probably worth saying that the election is still a factor here, just because we have the result now. We don't yet have, we have a minister appointed, but we don't even have junior ministers appointed yet. That will come over the next few days. And give it some time to get a steer, guys, on the D-TRO project itself. It might not be item number 1 on the agenda, but it is pretty high up there, so it shouldn't take too long, hopefully. So all that being said, let's go over now to John Harrod Booth for that overview of the data specification. John.
Good morning. It was an interesting phenomenon. I switched on my microphone and it minimized Teams. So apologies for that. I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking to you all about the data specification. It obviously is a set of documents that are being developed. These documents are available through the DFT D-TRO GitHub repository. John Cooper may talk about that later, but at the moment it's a private repository, which means you have to be invited to join it. However, that is in the process of becoming public, and so it'll be free access for everybody fairly soon. So what we have in terms of the data specification is sort of represented by the figure on the left-hand side. We have the data model itself, which is obviously defining the structure of a D-TRO record, and I'm not going to go into the detail of that because that's not really the subject of today's webinar, but that has a certain construct that a TRO may contain multiple provisions, and each of those provisions relates to one form of regulation and can relate to one or several locations, and we can qualify that by it operating at different times, it operating for different classes of vehicle, for different vehicle dimensions and the like. So that's all described in the data model. For those who are very technical, you can extract that data model both as an enterprise architect QEA file, but also as an XMI file. For those who are slightly less technical and wish to understand the construct of the data model and how the various bits fit together, there's a user guide that's been published. Those who are already linked into the GitHub resource will have noticed on Friday that we published a new suite of documents, and we've upgraded the data model by one minor revision. And it literally is one minor revision. We've changed one data type of one attribute between the previous version, which was 3.2.0 and 3.2.1, which was published on Friday. And subsequently, the data model user guide is also up-versioned as well. Allied to that, we also produce a JSON schema, which is the data structure represented by the data model, and a slim example of a sort of minimal D-TRO record that corresponds to that JSON schema. Subject to today's discussion is the interface control documents, which Gabriel will talk about at more length. We actually have 3 of those. 2 of those are externally facing, so one for publishers and one for data consumers. And I won't go into greater detail on those, but we also have one for the central service operator, which is internal for our purposes. Linked to all of that, when you are providing data against the data model specification and in the format of the JSON schema, we have a set of validation rules that apply, and that is also a published document. So all of these artifacts sit on the GitHub resource. We are in the process, and it was pointed out that when we published the JSON schema, when we recently published the 3.2.0 data model, that the JSON schema document was in fact erroneously put in there. We'll provide an update to that imminently. So watch this space, as they say. That overall is the suite of documents that really enable you as a set of developers to understand what we're trying to achieve and how you would get the data to us. And if there are other artifacts that you think should be included in that, or you have recommendations or observations on any of the documentation we produce, then please let us know. Gareth will talk to you later on about how you can provide us feedback, but we are more than willing to hear, be that via email, or indeed if you wish to provide comments and issues on the GitHub resource. So at this point, I think I hand over to Gabriel.
Hello, my name is Gabriel and I'm part of the software development team, and alongside with other fine people, I've put up this ICD, and I want to explain a little bit about what it is, an interface control document. So basically they are referring about the APIs that we developed, and they give you the details about the risk, the assumptions, and how basically an API should be consumed. Also, these APIs enable the integration between TRA and D-TRO service on one hand, and on the other hand, between the data consumers and the D-TRO service. And obviously, the target audience for this ICD are, as I said, on one hand, data publisher, that can be the TRAs or digital solution providers, and on the other hand is data consumer like SatNav or mapping application. So I would like next slide, please. I want to explain a little bit about the what's the integration as an overview of how this will work. Basically, I gave you the example of the TRA, but this is true for the other side of the spectrum. You have the traffic regulation authority that is doing a call through its software system and basically accessing the central D-TRO system, D-TRO service through an endpoint, calling a specific URI with a specific HTTP verb, and in response, it will get a HTTP code as a response alongside with the central store ID, and within its application, it will have a confirmation of a successful call. Hopefully, if not, it will be a proper error code that will tell exactly what had happened and why this call was not successful, in case it was not successful, and what one can do to mitigate that. Next slide, please. I want to present to you a little bit in details the ICD for data publishers. And as you imagine, there will be a difference between the data publisher and data consumers, because not all endpoints are for everybody, because it will not be necessary. So for data publishers, we'll have 19 endpoints, and basically they're plain CRUD operations, and for those of you more technical, CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. And this CRUD operation can be done on D-TRO, and some of them can be done on other on rules, on schema, or on searches that we need. And basically, we have these endpoints that are for D-TROs, for events, rules, and schema. And I want to point out a little bit around the event and search here. You see that there is a HTTP post, which means that you need to supply some information if you want to search for a particular event that had taken place on a specific D-TRO. Or also you have, if you want to search for existing D-TRO that matches specific criteria, you need to put a particular query. And all of these details are in the ICD documents. On each endpoint, it's very clearly detailed of what you should expect, what you should you provide, and all the other details that are pertaining for that particular endpoint. On the data publisher, also, you can have access to the rules and to the schema, and what are those are in place, and how can you interact. For instance, if you have rules, as HB mentioned earlier, let's say 3.2.1 rules, you'll have to have the schema specific to that version. So all of these are in sync, so you know exactly whenever you access rules or when you access a schema, you'll know exactly what you can what you get in return. The next slide will present a little bit about the ICD for data consumers. If I can have the next slide, please. So data consumers basically, as I said, they are the sat-nav applications and mapping application, and they basically want to know everything about a D-TRO. What is the D-TRO that it's in place for a particular TRA, and also what is the history and how that D-TRO was developed in the process, because you might have amendments to a D-TRO, I'm sure you already know this. So you want to know as a data consumer how this evolved and what are the steps that D-TRO went through. The other ones are basically the same, so you can search for D-TRO, you can search for event that had happened on a D-TRO, and also the rules and the schemas are working the same. What I want to present now, it's an example of how this ICD will be detailed on every endpoint, and I picked up an example for you. If I can have the next slide, please. I picked up an example for a TRA endpoint that you use as a TRA, and sorry, it is so small, but if you can press on the plus sign on the left bottom left hand side, you can zoom in and you can look more into details. But I want to present a little bit about this, because this will be the template that we're going to use in the ICD that will show exactly what will happen at every endpoint. As you see on the first line, we have the number of the endpoint, and we name the endpoint specifically with the name of the object that we are trying to pull or object that we're trying to provide. So in case of D-TRO, we said number D1, because this is the D-TRO example that I gave. And I gave the the verb, which is a post, which means that you can create a D-TRO, and the endpoint is create from file, because we have two options on create D-TRO. One can provide a file, a JSON file, we'll get into that later, and create a D-TRO, or probably if your system allows, you can have the payload and create that, but that will be another endpoint called create from body. But I'm going to talk a little bit about this create from file, which is, as I said, create a new D-TRO, and you have the description that is very straightforward. And if you look at the left-hand side input data type, I don't have anything to point to you at, but I think you got it under the description. It says that you can provide either JSON or XML or file or other that we're going to specify. But here in this case, we have file as a bolt, which means it has to be a file. It has to be a specific file, and that's the input data type accepted into this endpoint. Then the structure is very straightforward. Every structure, every call will have this header parameter correlation ID that it used to go through the inquiry stack and see how the things progressed, and it's good for auditing and metrics in the future. Also for this particular endpoint, we have a TA, which stands for traffic authority, and it has to be an int of 4 or 5 digit. And this has to be provided because I know we have specific SWA codes that each TRA is part of, so it has to be one of these. So I know we've tested with we've tested with 1585, which, if I'm correct, it's Essex Council. So also the field name that needs to be provided, it has to be a file between 1 kilo and 10 megabytes. And the very important on the nodes, it's the file has to contain the JSON payload describing a D-TRO, and has to be encoded into UTF-8. I'm sure that for technical people, this is very straightforward because this encoding is very useful to be lightweight for whenever you provide a JSON file. Now, after we send this request, we're gonna get back a response, and the response it should be either 200 or which 200 stands for OK. And as I mentioned earlier, every call to the D-TRO service will return an ID, and this ID is just an example, so don't take it as Bible. Is just an example. So 200 will be the ID return, or if the call is not successful, you will have various errors, which is 404. That means whenever we try to load a D-TRO, there is no schema that we can load a D-TRO against. Other error codes are 400, which is bad request and gives you the details of what type of the property was not correctly specified. And in this case, I put property because we have many examples. I don't know, let's say you put something that is it's not correct, and it will return that specific error telling you exactly what is wrong. And other error code types, is the one listed, and I'm sure for an API, these are the very standard error types, and they mean different things in different situation. Like, for instance, 502 bad gateway means that there are a problem between the servers. So, but again, 500 means that there is a problem with the connection between your local machine and the system. So you'll have various error codes. But this table that I've shown you, is just an example. You'll have, for each endpoint, you'll have these tables, and you will have very details, very specified details that will tell you what you need to provide and how you're going to expect the response. And again, this is purely the API, so we did not deal here with any interface or any other app that will sit on top of this API. Is just purely the API work here. So that's I believe that's my presentation. So I'm going to hand out to Q&A, if I'm correct, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Gabriel. Lovely old job there. Let's dive into the chat and see what we've got. I imagine it's been bubbling all over the place. I'm just going to go and have a look at it now. Okay, we do have a question. Fantastic. I'm not sure who's going to answer this. Maybe you, Gabriel. Will create from body be covered? I don't know what that means, but I hope you do, Gabriel.
Yeah, yes. As I mentioned, the create from body is just another example of creating a D-TRO, and basically it's the same representation of either you provide a file, either you copy the content of that file that it's a D-TRO and paste it in the place where the payload needs to be put. So this create from body is already covered.
Good, I guess. Are you limiting the API abilities for specific routes depending on the API access token? Open to anyone, that question, I guess.
I think I'll pick it up, this one. So the access token and accessing the API, it has to do, again, as I said, if you're a TRA or a DSP working for that TRA, you'll have certain work to do with the DFT and the CSO. I know the acronym, but I think it's what is the name of the CSO? It's a central service operator. So you will work then, and you're gonna link your system with DFT system, and they'll provide an API token, and based on that token, you will be able to do calls to the API. Also, on the other hand, on the data consumers side, also they will work with the CSO, and they will have as well an API token, and they will be able to access the API's endpoints.
Great. Sounds good to me. Now, this next one might be for John Harrod Booth, or possibly John Cooper might want to burst in. As a traffic authority, we have had all our TROs digitized in our corporate GIS for several years. But you guys have chosen a non-GIS standard or proprietary file format that's not easy for us to export our data to. We could have sent you a shape file, standard GeoJSON, all kinds of things. But given your non-GIS standard data file spec, what do you propose that we do?
Okay, very happy to answer that. I think it was Tim who asked the question. So Tim, it's a shame that you weren't on the previous webinar of this sort of nature, because we discussed some of the choices that have been made. We are using a standardized GIS data format, which is well-known text, WKT, which is both an OGC, Open Geospatial standard, and also an ISO standard, and is widely supported by a lot of software systems. Part of the reason for that, it's a bit convoluted, but part of the reason for that is that there is a dictum for government services that if they are dealing with data that is specifically within the bounds of the United Kingdom, that they should prefer to use as a coordinate referencing system British National Grid, and not use other alternatives such as WGS84. And I suppose there is an argument in favour of that, both from an integration viewpoint, and also if we ever get to the point where we're dealing with high precision information, we'll find that British National Grid is more stable than WGS84 because we're drifting continentally. So the choices we've made have been driven by that. It is a point of open discussion. I know a lot of data consumers use WGS84 and GeoJSON. GeoJSON actually excludes us because we choose to use British National Grid. GeoJSON 2016 version excludes us from using GeoJSON unless we are a closed community. But as we don't know who the data consumers will be, by definition, we can't be a closed community. So sorry for a very long and convoluted answer, but we have chosen formats which are internationally recognised and widely supported that meet UK government policy in terms of the data specifications. Sorry for a long answer.
No problem, John. Tim, do feel free to get in touch. It's dtro@dft.gov.uk. We'll happily, take this offline and talk in more detail about all that good stuff. Gabriel, back to you. Are we talking about separate tokens for publishing and consuming? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, we have to have separate tokens for publisher and separate for consumers. Yes, of course.
Okay, follow-up question for you. If you are linking the API token to the TRA, will you be undertaking any validation to ensure that the TRA parameter that is provided in the CRUD publisher endpoint matches the one of the token? I hope you got that.
Yes, I understand this question, and it's related around security, to making sure that we don't get from one place to another. And yes, all of these we have a good security system, so we'll making sure that these tokens are matching whenever the call is done. So if they don't match, the call will not be done. But again, bear in mind that the TRA will work closely with the CSO, as well as data publisher, data consumers will work close with CSO. So in case there is a problem, or there is a lack of work, if the system is not working, there is always people that you can reach on the DFT side, the CSOs, and they are more than willing to help.
Lots of people from the DFT used to dealing with CRUD. I had to get that in somewhere. Forgive me. Now, I'd be fascinated to hear, Robert K, where you're from, but this might be a question for JHB. What level of accuracy is the location data planned to provide? Is it accurate enough to be within 5-10 centimeters for each point? For our purpose, we need accurate location data. So, if it's anything less than 5 to 10 centimeters, that wouldn't work. Really fascinating question from my point of view. It's something we've kicked around on the project a fair bit, really. And now, to give you a little summary, John Harrod Booth.
Thank you, Paul. Given that we've just gone through an election, I'm really glad you asked that question. It would be really interesting, Robert, to find out which organisation you're from. The reality at the moment is that traffic regulation orders produced by the local authorities and produced by traffic regulating authorities have no inherent quality criteria in terms of how they're defined locationally. Many traffic orders are actually described in terms of verbal text written down. So 15 metres from the corner of North Street on the junction with XYZ Road will be the sort of thing you find in current orders. We're trying to introduce an approach which makes the data from those orders digital and brings it in using, and as per my last answer, brings it in using standardized geospatial mechanisms for encoding spatial coordinates. There's a bit of a tension there, which is we could define something which is extremely loose in terms of quality. We've discussed possibilities of in the limit of having no quality criteria, because that actually, in a sense, reflects what the current situation with TROs is in the real world. That's a bit challenging because the more open the interpretation of that, I suppose the more likely it is that it could be abused. Having worked in data systems for a long time, if you give somebody that sort of liberty, we could well find a Of course, none of the local authorities would ever do this, but we could well find somebody saying, well, I'll give you a nice square that's somewhere in the middle of the UK, which actually doesn't represent the position of the TRO, but it passes the criteria because the criteria are so loose it doesn't really matter. At the other end of the spectrum, we have discussed the need for what could be required for automated vehicles, and have spoken about accuracies in the 5 to 10 centimetre range. I think that would horrify most local authorities, if I'm honest, about how we would go about producing that. In the last webinar, we introduced a accuracy criteria which is being proposed, and it was quite heavily debated, and all views on that topic are very welcome. So there was a proposal that we're looking at, that spatial coordinates should be accurate on an absolute basis to about to better than 2 meters, which is of course a very long way from your 5 to 10 centimeters. It is an interesting point of discussion, and we absolutely do welcome different perspectives on this. I should also say that from a DFT perspective, it's a journey. We're starting on a journey. There is no central digital record of TROs at the moment. There are plenty of supplier systems that capture digital TROs, but the quality criteria to which they do them is not well defined. And so we have to start somewhere. And for the moment, we're starting at perhaps a moderately lax level, with a perspective that may over time tighten. But of course, we have to try and strike a balance between what is cost effective in terms of what the local authorities do and what is meaningful in terms of how the data is consumed. So the answer at the present time is we're looking at criteria around absolute limit of 2 meters. But if there's a strong argument in favour of things that are much tighter, DFT would love to hear them.
Thank you, John. Robert is from Grid Smarter Cities, which is very interesting. There's a follow-up from him in the chat as well around a specific use case, so check that out. All that stuff is really interesting for us. Also in the chat, there is a little update from us on the GitHub situation. A lot of hard work from John Cooper the last couple of weeks on that to try and advance that. Essentially, watch this space for that, and there'll be an update. Do see John's comments in the chat around the external repo. Here's one. I guess this is a question for Gab. Is there a restriction on the size of a message if we use the create from body API call?
Yes, I gave you the example of create from file that has to be between 1 kilobyte and 10 megabytes, but also create from body, it's the same, 10 megabytes is the maximum size, but also in the detail in that table for that particular endpoint, it will be specified as well. So 10 megabytes.
The second you started talking, I realized you'd answered it in the chat, Gabriel. Thank you very much. There's a question here, and I suppose it's really for the DFT, but John Harrod Booth might wish to come in. Have you consulted with the Geospatial Commission on the data model, especially file type issues? Did you want to go first there, JHB?
I'm happy to go first. I'd like to hear DFT's opinion. Not expressly. We have spoken to the Geospatial Commission about other related topics, such as geospatial licensing and a relationship with Ordnance Survey. On file type, file format, no. Happy to have those discussions. We are following published guidance, much of which comes from the Geospatial Commission.
Thank you, John. Hope you're okay after being thrown under that bus. Any comment there at all, John Cooper?
Hi, everyone. No, I don't think I can add much to that. I think John's right. We haven't expressly consulted Geospatial Commission on this. We are happy to facilitate that and get them into the equation as we head towards private beta, though.
Thank you, John. Just in closing on the issue of accuracy, I was going to say, just to emphasise what John Harrod Booth said, it's a journey that we're on, you know. So we just want to get this service up and running and start getting the information in, and then, you know, over time we can look to improve the accuracy and all that fantastic stuff. You know, let's not let perfect be the enemy of good. I'm sure we would all agree. That seems to me to be the end of the chat. Lovely old job, guys. I enjoyed that, even if I didn't fully understand all of it. I do believe what we'll do is we'll pop over to Dr. Gareth Tilley now for an update, and then we will go just back to the chat at the end to see if there's any further remarks or comments. Doctor.
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, I just wanted to run through the engagement program over the next few months. Effectively, as you know, part of private beta and part of the process is very much for us to use this approach to get information and feedback from the community itself. So first thing to say is that the ICDs are now located on GitHub, as John Cooper's been saying in the chat. At the moment, the GitHub is private GitHub, and that has limited number of users, but we are in the process of transitioning that to a public GitHub. We're doing that as soon as possible, and then we'll be able to open it up to the wider community. But if you do have any issues, please just get in touch. The email address is on the next slide. In terms of webinars and working group sessions, our next feedback session is on the 7th of August, and that's very much, we appreciate that ICDs were issued at the end of last week, and you'll take some time enjoying those, no doubt. And really, that session will enable us to get further feedback from yourselves. But don't feel that you have to wait for the 7th of August. Please get in touch in the meantime if you've got any critical comments. That'd be fantastic. We've got our next wider webinar on the 29th of July, and that's with the whole group. That's not a technical webinar, that's for an open session where we'll update on the programme as a whole. And I did want to flag that we are going to be attending some conferences in the autumn. So we'll be presenting at HighWest UK on the 16th of October. That'll be at I think it'll be at NEC, usually up in Birmingham. And we'll also be at the Transport Technology Forum Autumn Conference in November. That'll be in Birmingham as well. So we're doing some outreach at conferences too. Usual ways to get information that folk know about, I'm sure by now. Transport Technology Forum website's key for us, and we've got the link there, and that's got details of the previous webinars we've done, and also the FAQ list that we've been maintaining following the webinars. So that's our rolling FAQ, and every time we have a session like this, if there's kind of pertinent questions, we'll just add that to the FAQ. So that's updated reasonably regularly. We've also put some of the webinars and some of the kind of videos up onto the YouTube channel. So there's also the videos up there as well. But the key one is the email, and if you want to get in touch, email us at dtro@dft.gov.uk. I think that was the key stuff on outreach, Paul. Thanks for that.
Lovely old job. John Cooper, did you want to come in here at all?
Yes, please. I think it's also worth saying that we know that a lot of you are out there waiting for us to communicate more explicitly with full instructions for what it means to be a participant in private beta. And indeed, am I a participant in private beta? We have of course, been slightly constrained on what we can say by the election. We are having our new team of ministers doing presentations to DFT only this afternoon. It will take a little bit of time, as Paul said earlier, for the high-level administration's thoughts to trickle down to us on specific projects. But we are anticipating and getting ready to communicate all those important questions about exactly when and how and who are going to help us go through into private beta, and indeed when is it all starting. But just watch this space for a few more days, perhaps weeks, for us to be able to fully communicate everything to everyone, and we'll be putting together information packs and other announcements to go out on that. So just wanted to come in there with that one, because we know that several of you have been asking us in the email and other ways of what is happening there, and we do apologize that we haven't been able to do that up until now, but hopefully you'll understand why there's been a delay. And that's all from me.
Thank you, John Cooper. Let's just take one last look at the chat. And Gabriel, I just want to publicly answer this one because it's a good one. Are the endpoints now available to us to start creating test messages?
Well, I'm sure the date will be communicated by DFT. At this moment, we are developing, we're putting different environments that we can be able to test this, for data consumers and data publisher. But the date exactly when this can be accessed will be delivered by DFT.
Thank you, Gabriel. I'm loving the enthusiasm there, though. Similar to what John just said, we are close and watch the skies for more info on that. Well, that seems to be all of the chat, pretty much. Gabriel doing the Lord's work there, answering some of those questions as they've been coming in. So fantastic news, guys. We get to end nice and early. I hope you've enjoyed that latest webinar from us, and see you back here for future webinars over the coming weeks and months. Great having you. Take care of yourselves, guys. Bye.